I'm using a 1/2 inch brush, using some cadmium yellow and just sketching in the horizon line, and now these distant mountains here just with a pale blue. That's about all the drawing you need to do at this stage, so it's perfect for beginners. This, you're just building this painting from the ground upwards, basically just, you know, large area like that blue. Now I'm blocking in the sky using some white and cobalt blue, or you can use the blue that you previously used on your surface, like the primary blue. But it's just sort of really loading your brush, painting on the acrylics, really sort of blending it in there. I'm trying to keep it quite light, just at the back of these mountains here to create some depth, so it looks like it's receding behind the mountain. And I'm just painting in some white clouds here as well, wet into wet. I've mixed up a little bit of cobalt blue, a touch of cadmium red and some white, so it's quite a grey sort of violet colour, and I'm painting it with my flat 1 inch brush, wet on dry. I'm actually going to use a little bit of cadmium yellow now with my 1 inch brush, just sort of painting the first layer on this blue sort of base layer here. Yellow can be quite a transparent colour, so I'll need a couple of layers of this. What I'm doing now is I've mixed up a little bit of that primary blue into the yellow, so it's a limey green. I'm just painting a little bit of that limey green in the foreground, wet on wet. The painting has dried now, and I've mixed up quite a dark green using a Prussian blue with a quinacridone magenta with a touch of yellow. You could use the Prussian blue with some burnt sienna or burnt umber. So I've got a lovely dark green here, and I'm going to paint this wet on dry with my 1/2 inch flat brush for these distant dark trees. I'm just going to use a little bit of the lighter green here. It's the yellow with the Prussian blue with a little tiny bit of red, so it's quite a warm green. Just painting a little bit of light just on the edge of those trees with my flat 1/2 inch brush there, wet on dry. I'm just adding a little bit of orange here, the red and yellow mixed up, just so it looks like distant poppies on the horizon line there at the top of the field. I'm adding a little bit of violet and blue there as well, just to create a little bit of, you know, different colours there. There's lovely colours coming from that photograph as well there. And I'm adding a touch more, a little accent of red here to really give it a pop just on the horizon line, and blending it with my fingertips there. The painting has dried, and I'm just painting another layer on the horizon line here in the distance here, using my flat 1 inch brush, just blending it through there. Really load your brush, get plenty of paint. I've added a little bit of red there to get a bit of warmth to these distant fields here with my flat 1 inch brush, wet into wet. I really added lots and lots of yellow here with a touch of white as well to really lighten up this colour. I really want that contrast of dark and light, those dark trees in the distance with this lovely light field in the distance and in the middle ground here as well, just blending the colours through. I'm using a little bit of the primary blue here with the yellow, really lots of colour on my brush here, and really sort of blending this sort of limey colour through, really trying to colour match the painting as well here, and it brings these grasses forward as well. I'll use the tip of my brush as well, as you can see here, to paint thinner marks as well, really to create that look of the field there with that lovely yellow in the distance, middle distance, and then you've got the lovely sort of limey greens with a slightly darker green in the foreground. I'm using a thinner liner brush here with some much darker green, adding the Prussian blue with the magenta with a little bit of yellow there, and just painting some longer, darker grasses. I'm using the tip of my brush as well to create some textures and marks there as well, really building up the detail to bring these grasses forward to create depth in the painting. The painting has dried and I'm using the flat 1-inch brush just with some cadmium yellow on its own, and just pulling it up over the darks of the distant trees there, just to soften it really and to give the impression of sort of grasses in the distance. I'm adding some more yellows and a little bit more sort of orangey colour, wet into wet, into this sort of distant fields and coming into the middle ground fields here. I'm using this light yellow colour. I'm cutting into the sort of foreground grasses as well to create a little bit of light and contrast with the slightly darker grasses. I'm using my card, it's just a paper cardboard, and just printing with the edge of the card there, just painting on the edge and printing to get some lovely thin marks, thin grasses. It's quite nice. It's a light colour. It's the yellow with a touch of white with a tiny touch of the blue. So the painting has dried and I wasn't really happy with the sky, so I'm just going over with some white and with a little bit of the red and blue sort of really sort of paled down, so you've got a very soft grey sky. I'm getting lots of white in there as well, and I just want to really tidy up those mountains. It didn't really work for me, and you know what, the great thing about acrylics is you can change it. You can paint over the top, and you know, it makes you braver in trying things out, but also you know that you can actually get rid of mistakes or just change the composition or colours or whatever you want to do. You've got the freedom to do that, and in doing that I thought I'd make these distant mountains a little bit lighter, so I'm just using my flat 1-inch brush, working wet on dry, just cutting into those trees there, but just simplifying them a little bit. They were coming forward too much, so I'm pushing them back in a way to create depth. Just to say, I have painted the poppies in without realising I hadn't actually put the camera on. So what I'm doing is I'm repeating what I did. So I'm just painting on some cadmium red, wet on dry. The painting is completely dry with my flat brush, just really basic sort of shape. So imagine there's no red there, and that's exactly what I did. And on the right hand side of the poppies, I put a little bit more of an orangey colour, so an orange red, so you can mix a bit of yellow with your red. It's because the light's coming a little bit, if you look at the photograph, it's coming from the right. So it's just bear that in mind, but that was a bit of a shame there. But I'm painting these violet flowers here with a mixture of the cobalt blue and a touch of pink, and the seed heads and the buds there with a little bit of the yellow and blue. And I'm using the card again to print in some of the stems there, wet on dry. And it's quite a nice way, especially if you're worried about painting thin stems, which can be tricky. Why not try this technique? The great thing about the card is you can sort of bend it a little bit so it doesn't look too stiff or straight. So you can really be it's quite flexible, and you can make your stems and leaves look flexible. You can also use a liner or a rigger brush, which is what I'm doing here. I try to sort of keep my brush at the top and then just pull it down in one stroke. But the great thing about acrylics, if it goes wrong, just wipe it off or let it dry and paint over the top. So I'm just sort of finessing some of these stems here. I'm painting in some of the darks on top of the seed head here with the primary blue and the magenta. You could use blue and brown there. This dark really pulls the seed head forwards and creates depth in your painting. I'm using the rigger now to paint sort of yellow and white, just to create a few more lighter grasses in the foreground to create that contrast of light against dark. I mixed up a little bit of a light green here, the white, the yellow and a touch of blue, painting the light on the right hand side here and blending as well a little bit. It really makes them pop out. The darks are on the left hand side. I'm just finessing that as well here just to make sure that you've got your dark against light. The light is coming from the right hand side, so all the light side, the right side of your stems and grasses and seed heads and poppies will be lighter on the right hand side. I've mixed up a little bit of cobalt blue, some white with a tiny touch of pink. I'm just painting some light on the top of these violet flowers here, just to create some light here. And I'm actually a bit of artistic license, as you can see. That's what I did with the poppies. I painted more poppies than what there were in the photograph, and I've done the same thing with the violet flowers. So the painting has dried now, and I'm using Cadmium Red Deep to actually paint the shadows and dark marks on the poppies. If you don't have Cadmium Red Deep, you could use red with a tiny touch of the cobalt blue or a magenta to make this darker shade of shadow colours here, using my 1/2 inch flat brush. And I'm using the flat of the brush but also the tip of the brush to create some of those lovely markings on the poppy. Take your time, you know, create that, you know, really half close your eyes to look at where the shadows are there. It really brings the poppies to life. This is a little bit of the Prussian blue with the Cadmium Red Deep, and you can put a touch of yellow if it looks too violet. I'm just painting the darks here at the top of the stems there, to start building up really these darks and details, looking to finish my painting here. So it's really building up from that very sort of dark blue wash sort of basic colour that I had at the beginning, and now I'm finessing here with details here and there. I'm using some sort of a yellowy orange colour here to paint some light and marks on the right hand side of the poppies. It doesn't seem to come across too well on the film, but there is a lot more light on the right hand side of those poppies. And I'm finishing off here using my rigger and just painting a little bit of detail on these violet flowers. They looked a little bit flat, so I'm just putting a mid-tone on there to bring them to life. I'm using a little bit of the yellow here, literally straight on its own, just to paint a few light areas on these stems here on the right hand side. So I'm masking out the sort of horizon line here. I'm going to spatter some red, watered down cadmium red paint with my liner brush just to create a little bit of texture and details. Again, this isn't in the photograph, so it's a bit of artistic license, but it's nice to use a photograph as a reference and change it, which is what I have done here, you know, adding more poppies and poppies on the horizon here. You can also stipple these poppies as well with your brush, and I'm also spattering some of the red and stippling some of the red poppies in the foreground here to finish off. So here is the finished painting. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it inspires you to have a go at painting a poppy field acrylic painting. If you have any questions about this tutorial, please put them in the comments section below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. And if you'd like to see more tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe to my acrylic painting channel. And to watch more tutorials like this, why not click the playlist above and you can enjoy more step-by-step tutorials. Thanks again for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.